welcome back to Ratchetthoughtsisms. We got an amazing episode for you guys today. I hope you are prepared. But before we get started, I know you're wondering, who's that lady in the front?
Who's that lady?
Oh, sorry. She got the vocals?
Wait. Time out. Before we do any introductions, because this is a serious subject, Uptown, you know what you gotta do.
The thoughts and opinions of Uptown, Uptown B, Uptown Bravo, whatever y'all want to call me, are solely the thoughts and opinions of me. They do not reflect upon the lovely cast members of Ratchetthoughtsisms or Dr. Tate.
Thank you.
I'm scared that you were the only one who had to give a disclaimer?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the stuff he says is
wow.
Noted. Okay.
Yeah. So, Uptown Brown has actually introduced Dr. Tate, but Dr. Tate, give us a little history about yourself before we get started.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Tay. I'm a psychologist. I've been a psychologist for 6 years. I work for the City University of New York in the counseling center. I am also a pastor, also a professor, and what else? I'm forgetting. I mean, I was talking professionally. I don't want to seem like I forgot the kids.
That is a profession.
It is full-time. I'm also mother to two amazing children, 7 and 5.
That is a full-time profession, for real. They need to put that on the...
Because they're teenagers in their heads.
I know.
Awesome. All right. And as you know, I am Luke, Harlem Skywalker in the building, Harlem's finest.
I'm Ramona. I'm in the building.
Hollywood Dre, Brooklynite.
Yeah.
And you've already heard the infamous Mr. Uptown Brown, Uptown Bravo. All right, so if you haven't guessed, our special guest, today's episode is actually going to be about mental illness. And we have a couple of questions that we want to ask the esteemed doctor with her experience, because we know that mental illness is, for whatever reason, has some type of negative connotation behind it. Like, it's something that you shouldn't seek or you shouldn't want to go and get help for, right? And we want to just know, like, from your experience in this field, like, what do you think the reasons for that are?
Do we have time? How much time do we have?
Man,
I don't want to.
I mean, this could end up being a two-parter because mental health in the Black community is such a major thing.
It is.
That I seriously doubt that in the 45 minutes to an hour that we have, that we're going to be able to capture everything that we need to talk about.
Definitely. It's a major unspoken thing. Like, you have the social media hashtags and you have the people who are, putting different mental health facts up, but there's still a lot that we're not talking about. And back to your question about why. Historically, the psychological field was created by middle-aged white men. So I think that a lot of us, not just Black people, but people of color, were less inclined to go and seek therapy, because how are they going to relate to us if they don't look like us? They don't understand us. And there are more Black people of color in the field as mental health professionals, but still those who are in power, so to speak, the executives running the companies and running these clinics, are middle-aged white men, middle-aged white women. And we know our history. You're what my great-great-grandmama's slave master looked like. I'm not going to bear all to you. I'm not going to talk about my trauma to you, because you are the person who traumatized me and the generations before me. But those are the things that are probably unconscious, the generational trauma that we don't think about. It's just like, I'm not going to no therapist. I'm not crazy. Grandmama didn't. Mama didn't.
Go to church. Go to the pastor.
I wouldn't even go there yet.
Know,
but yes.
So I was growing up to taught that go to the pastor. Don't talk your business to nobody.
Yep.
But in regards to what you said, so you feel like as an African American, we're better off going to another African American therapist opposed to a Caucasian or Native American therapist?
Not necessarily. It's about connection. It's like church. It's more about relationships. So if you find that you're connected to someone who is a middle-aged white man, then so be it. But I think that just like kids, when it comes to developing friendships, when they're younger, they are going to connect to people who look like them, who are similar, who like the same cartoons and things like that. Elements of that stick with us when we get into adulthood. So, off rip, is that what the kids say now? Off rip? Like, off, yeah, nobody's saying.
I'm not young. I don't know what.
But you might be, you know, close, but like initially,
I know what you're saying.
you might be closer, you know, to the kids, ears to the street. But like, we might think, okay, well, you're a middle-aged white woman, you're not going to understand where I come from.
But I never thought that. I never thought that until today.
But you might be the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, I never thought that.
Because my first ever client, he would always talk about the fact that I was a young black woman and I had no understanding of what he was going through. So sometimes people just lead with that, especially if their trauma or the reason that they're in therapy has anything to do with race.
When I was in therapy, I definitely knew I wanted a black therapist. Or for it. Like,
why?
Yeah, I was about to ask. Like,
because I felt like they could understand certain things about life as a black man that a white person would just never understand. You know what I'm saying?
True.
Like, there's just certain connections that we all have being black, you know what I'm saying? Certain things that we go through daily that only another black person can understand.
Like, I honestly agree. I'm actually looking for a new therapist, but I would need somebody who can understand things culturally. So the therapist that I would look for would have to know the church, as well as, like, you know, growing up as a, you know, person of color. Because if I make references to the church and you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you can't speak to what I'm dealing with, you know, which
so
makes it difficult for you to, you know, be my therapist, because you can't
so
understand.
You say to your therapist, you say, "Hey neighbor."
Yeah. They gotta tell you.
I know.
Turn to your neighbor and say,
"Hey neighbor." Right.
So I'm glad you bring it up. And thank you for answering the question about the negative connotation. So, Dre just mentioned he was looking for, you know, or a child new therapist. So when do you know, like, you should seek a therapist? Like, how do you know, like, okay, like, I might need some help?
I can answer that. When I was in therapy, my mom passed January 1st, 2018. By Valentine's Day the next year, I was in therapy because I knew I wasn't going to be able to walk around and be sane and be myself if I didn't put myself in therapy.
Okay.
Like, I just knew it.
That was obviously a traumatic experience, but I mean, obviously there are things like that.
I mean, but there's plenty of people that go through that type of trauma and just feel like they could just tough it out. You know what I'm saying? Especially black men. Black men are always told, man up, deal with it. You know what I'm saying?
Listen.
Like, so
what you crying for?
Yeah. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, that was a traumatic experience. Obviously you knew, but it ain't that obvious to some people all the time.
Listen, I'm gonna tell you from my experience, and that's why I asked you, because and this is a question that I wanted to ask, like, why do we normalize, you know, trauma, right? Because I personally, my mother passed when I was 4 years old, right? And I didn't actually start the healing process of that until I was in my 30s, and I went to her grave, and I'm talking about boo-hoo snot cry, like, not that, like, you know, you get hit, I mean, like, it was like booger, like, it was for like a half an hour. I couldn't even, it was like the waterworks was on, and that's when I knew.
Did it feel good after you was done?
It was
felt
like,
good, right? You felt lighter.
That was a relief.
oh my gosh, it was like these rocks that was on my, I didn't even know I even had them. And I have this, if you've heard this, you've probably heard it because it came from me. You don't know, you can't heal if you don't know that you're hurting. Right? And I say that because I experienced it. I thought I was fine, right? So that's why I asked, like, how do you know when to go see a therapist for whatever? You know, your experience is different from mine. I haven't seen a therapist yet, and it was like, so I don't know when. So wait, before you let her answer before we go. Yes.
I like the fact that he wants. I'm sorry. That you want to answer, because that shows that, you know, it's normal. It's okay for black men to seek therapy, and you sought it out. It's not like somebody had to commit you. There weren't people saying, oh, well, you did it for yourself. And I think that speaks volumes, because it's not just about the man saying that, you know, we need to take medication, because a lot of people, especially black people, oh, well, I'm not going to therapy because they're going to medicate me. But I'm going off on a tangent.
I'm sorry. I know you're in the middle of that, but because you just mentioned therapy and medication, I need you to differentiate therapy and psychology, like psychologists.
Psychiatrists.
Psychiatrists, because therapists don't necessarily give you medication. Psychiatrists do. So I need you to differentiate what you do and what a therapist does.
Okay, so I am a therapist.
Well, both. Yeah, but she's both.
I'm not.
Oh no?
I'm not a psychiatrist.
Oh, I thought you was.
I do not give med. So the difference.
So sorry.
Okay, so you have a lot of different mental health providers. You have licensed mental health counselors, licensed clinical social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between a therapist, like a psychologist and a psychiatrist, is a degree and what they do. So a psychologist has a doctorate of psychology or a doctorate of philosophy in clinical psychology, and they do talk therapy.
Right.
So a therapist does talk therapy. A psychiatrist makes sure that you don't want to end your life and make sure that you have your meds. They don't do therapy. Now there are some unicorns out there who are psychiatrists. They have their MD or their DO, but they also do the talk therapy. So those types of people are good for the type of person who is doing medication management while they are in therapy. And that's typically the way to do it.
Do you ever refer someone to a psychiatrist after seeing you?
Sometimes.
Sometimes,
depending on, now, where I am now, we don't diagnose. Okay. So, but if they have a history, let's say a student comes in and they have a history of a psychotic disorder, and they hear voices, they've been in and out of the mental health system, but they're off their meds. I would say if you don't have a psychiatrist, find one. If you don't have your meds and you've been off your meds for like 3 weeks, go to the nearest ER. Absolutely.
I have a question. Why don't you diagnose?
That's because of the what's the word? Not atmosphere. The environment that I work in, because I work at a college, and the designation that my particular college has.
So if you did like private sessions, would you diagnose?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially if I was on insurance panels, I would have to.
All right.
So that's the difference.
Yep.
Your question was, when do you know you have to go to therapy? So the way I break it down is there's 3 levels of coping. So level 1, that's individual coping, like the things that you can do by yourself. You don't need anybody else. So like deep breathing, you don't need anybody else to deep breathe. Taking a walk, you don't need anyone else. You don't need any additional resources. Then you have your level 2 coping techniques that require other people or other resources. So let's say playing basketball is a coping strategy for you.
Like Hennessy?
If that is your coping technique of choice, there's a difference between positive coping and negative coping, and what's constructive and what's not. But sure. Short answer.
Wait. Don't skate past that. Don't skate past. I need to know. Like is Hennessy or Casamigos
we are
a negative thing?
We are not going to promote these people, okay?
These are the questions.
I'm just asking questions. I mean,
want to know.
Ace of Spades, do say. Is that's a negative thing? Or should they just go to church?
You can opt to please
try Jesus.
You can
don't try me. But you're trying me right now. What'd you say?
You can opt to plead the fifth, okay, and continue to go.
There are things. Okay, so what does it mean to cope? Coping simply means doing something to help you get through. So yes, your Henny could be a coping technique, but when you come down from that, not high, but that wave or whatever, are your problems still there?
Right.
My problems still
might have more problems. You don't know how much Henny I drunk.
Exactly.
How much Casamigos I had that night.
So
might have more problems.
It's temporary.
More Henny, more problems.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's temporary?
Yes. So in the moment it's helping you,
right?
But long term it's not.
Right.
So that would be considered a negative coping technique because it does more harm than good.
Right.
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say something, but I'm gonna stop.
I know he was getting ready to. That's why I had to stop him. Go ahead.
Thank you.
So back to level 2, coping. So that's when you need other people or other resources. So when you have a support system, like talking to a friend, talking to a significant other, that would be level 2 because it's a coping technique that you utilize that you need something or someone else.
Right.
And then the level 3 is the professional level, where you've exhausted all of your coping techniques and you still feel as though you're in distress. That's when it's time to seek help.
So let me break this down. So level 1 would just be sitting at home alone listening to Drake.
Sure, music is...
Level 2 would be Hennessy or vagina. And then level 3 would be a therapist.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Unless your level 2 is also a therapist, then it gets kind of murky.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to, clean it up for the people, you know what I'm saying?
So
We might need another disclaimer from Uptown.
we have one already. That's all we
know.
do.
Just sprinkle it throughout.
Sheesh.
The whole show.
No, but I mean, it's real. People use
Sex
and alcohol.
Like, I'm making light of it, but these are things that people do.
Real.
These are things that people do.
So I do want to know, like lately, I think y'all spoke about this earlier, the fact that mental health has become very, very more prominent amongst us as of late.
Yes.
What do you think is the reason why we're talking more about mental health amongst our, in our communities now? Whereas it was, like you said, we understand that it was started by middle-aged white people, and that's what they've had for the longest. What is it that makes us now want to do it?
Because we see more people who look like us. So we're more inclined to receive from people who have, or at least look like they have a similar experience than we are others. So like there are black male therapists who have social media followings of 12K. Social media helps because we can get information about trauma on social media, on Instagram, like, wow, that's me. But you can do it from the comfort of your phone and not be exposed, so to speak, because we're concerned about exposure, right? But I think that's a big part because there are more of us in the field, so it's like, it's safe now.
I would like to piggyback on that. I think another reason might be we've all lived and we're still living through this COVID thing, right? I feel like every person on the planet has some form of PTSD from living through this. And if you're black, double down on that. So I think we finally reached a point where people have no choice but to just face whatever they're going through. And I'm glad that people are trying to face it in a productive way. But like with all the stuff that you, especially like I said, you look at all the stuff that happened during COVID, the Breonna Taylor, the George Floyd. If you black living in this country, you're living with some sort of PTSD.
Now, educational moment. You can have traumatic symptoms but not be diagnosed with PTSD. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for those who might not know.
Right.
So you can present with symptoms that are trauma symptoms, but you don't necessarily have the diagnosis. And the diagnosis requires a licensed professional.
If you black,
so not everybody.
If you black, you got it.
If you black and you live in opinion.
That's
Uptown Brown.
He just ignored my educational moment.
Yes, and that's okay. You can have your opinion because it's yours. It's
right, because you gave the disclaimer.
So I have two things I want to say. First thing is, I took a class about mental health in college, and I asked the professor, "What is trauma? Like, what is trauma? How did you get trauma?" So he said to me, "It's like a TV that won't be fixed. So if you're getting punched and you can't fight back, after a certain time, it becomes trauma. You have a period, you have a window that if I don't fight back before this amount of time, it's gonna become a trauma. So it's like you keep hitting that TV and it won't fix. So you have a fight or flight reaction. So it's like if you don't fight between a certain time, it's gonna become a trauma."
So that's an interesting perspective that you said your professor shared with you.
Right.
So one thing that I always tell my students and people on platforms like this, trauma is not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up because, and you mentioned you didn't know that you needed to heal until like decades later, literally. Right. If we don't know how to define trauma, then we're not going to be able to identify it when it happens. Because some people will say, well, I got abused. I was sexually abused when I was a kid, but I'm fine. You could be, because not everybody responds to the same situation in the same way. Or you've gotten used to your trauma response and accepted it as your norm. So that's one thing, it's how you respond, not the actual situation. Because a car accident can be traumatic for someone, but not for another. Rape could be traumatic for someone, most people, but not for someone else. It depends on, we're all a product of our experience. So it depends on what you've experienced, your level of resilience, your support system, all of that. As far as what your professor said, and it's like, a TV that won't work, that
because you can't change the channel. Like you can't move it.
Okay,
You're stuck in that one instance.
Yeah, and the word that you said is perfect, stuck.
Right.
So the best way to understand trauma is by looking at animal instincts or animals' response.
Right.
So let's say a bear, bears are usually the ones scaring folk, but let's say an animal is afraid. They'll have the interaction, they'll be afraid, they'll be able to shake it off, and then keep it pushing.
Right.
A trauma response is when you're not able to keep it pushing, when you're stuck in the traumatic event.
Right.
So let's say your traumatic event happened on the subway, and you can no longer, you avoid the subway at all costs. So when you're on the subway, you start to hyperventilate. You have, what do you call it? You have flashbacks, you have nightmares. Those are all indicative of a trauma response.
And he says you gotta stay present when that happens, stay present. Like you're not 7, you're not 12, you're not getting raped, you're not drowning, you're not in a car, you're on a train. Stay present, stay in today, stay right now.
And that would most often take therapy or a class like that.
Right.
Because that's not everyone's that's not everyone's go-to. Right. Not everyone is able to say, okay, this is not that moment, deep breath. No, we go from 0 to 100 real quick because we don't know that it's a trauma response. We've accepted this as our norm. It's so crazy. I had one student and she came in just as nonchalant as can be, and she's just like, I feel like I'm going crazy. I'm not myself anymore, and nothing makes sense. Like nothing's really happened. And then she casually said that she miscarried.
Oh wow.
You don't think that has anything to do with what we talking about today. Right. But based on her history and her culture, that might not have been considered trauma. So in her mind, it's just like, I feel like I'm going crazy because this is a change from my norm.
Right.
This is the mediating variable. That's probably what caused it. So that's what trauma is. It's not what happened, but how you respond to it. And it's that response is being stuck in the moment.
So you just mentioned regular trauma, but earlier you talked about generational trauma. And we were talking
he wants to go on the historical trauma. He wants to go on that.
I just want to know, like, how, because I don't know if anybody necessarily knows if they're actually dealing with that. Especially not right now, the pandemic is happening, and we got all these Black Lives Matters protests and stuff like that going on. Does do people? I'm getting a face, but do people actually know what generational trauma is and how to deal with that? What that looks like.
Yeah. Now that we know what the definition of trauma is, now let's break down the definition of the word generation. So generation, you have a group of people all about the same age, and then you have a generation before that, or a group of people before that who are the parents. Those are generations, right? Mm-hmm. So you have trauma that spans generations. And generational trauma and historical trauma are not mutually exclusive, but they are similar. So historical trauma can be a collective event that everybody experienced. Generational trauma is something that's carried down. And the way I explain it is, Big Mama went through it, Mama went through it, I'm going through it, and if I don't address it, my daughter is going to go through it. That's generational trauma. And it's generational because it's not addressed. So I think what you're speaking about is more so historical trauma, because I referred to that when we were talking about why people of color, black people, do not seek therapy, because therapy traditionally is white. There's a book about it. It says even the rats were white.
Well, I mean, I feel like the main problem with even being able to identify the different types of trauma is that anytime you normalize a behavior, good or bad, it affects your whole thought process.
Absolutely.
So if you live in a loving, caring environment and you grow up in that, that's your norm. You pass it on to your children. If you grow up in dysfunction, you normalize that, you pass it on to your children.
Yes.
Any behavior you normalize, good or bad, stays with you, and you carry it with you and you pass it on.
That's true.
And normalizing means that you're not addressing it if it is a problem.
Some people don't think they have a problem.
Correct.
Like
that's part of normalizing it.
Right, but for me, sometimes I think like when I do something, I'm like, why am I like this? Like I have to step back and think like, this is not normal what I'm doing. Because if it was normal, everyone would be doing it. And everyone is not doing this, so there's something wrong, not wrong with me, but why am I like this?
And sometimes it's just because you're different. Like, you know, we all have our quirks and idiosyncrasies and all of that. But then sometimes it's something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be checked.
Right.
But we have to be in a safe enough space where we can say to ourselves, it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
But we don't get that opportunity. We don't get that opportunity to have those safe spaces. We don't have those emotionally safe environments because some of us did not come up in emotionally safe environments. And I'm not Caribbean, but I have Caribbean friends and I've had Caribbean clients, and everything is still the same. Like, I couldn't talk about how I feel. What are feelings?
Right.
So after being in an environment where you didn't feel emotionally safe, you grow up as an adult who doesn't feel emotionally safe. There's like that one emotional response, and that's how you respond to everything.
Yeah.
It's anger or being dismissive or neglect. I went off on a tangent. What was I saying before?
No, you did go off on a tangent. You're totally fine. I was gonna ask because you were. I thought it was called inherited trauma, but you're saying it's generational trauma as far as the things that we.
You know
what?
what?
Difference.
Different ways to say the same thing.
Okay.
Essentially.
Because I know, and you mentioned that we don't know who to speak to. Like we don't know how to talk about our feelings.
Oh, right, because we didn't have safe spaces.
Safe spaces, right? And I know, so I'm from Harlem. Rob, you from Harlem.
Facts.
Right? Uptown Brown. And we've seen a lot of stuff in Harlem.
Facts.
And I could tell you 100% that I've normalized a lot of the stuff that I've seen. Like, I've seen someone get shot, like, right in front of me. And I can tell you, when I see that moment, everything else after it cuts off. Like, I don't know what happens after that. Like, I can tell you what I did, what happened, and the mind is a crazy thing because I know that's a repressed memory. Like, like, nah, you don't need to relive none of that. Like, shut down over, right? But I can't say to someone on my peoples and be like, because for us, it's normal.
Right.
It's like,
why are you talking about that? Get over it.
Like, oh yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Just last week. Oh, okay. Like, you know, so it's like I don't know. Like, how do you figure out that normalization is not normal, and you gotta be like, yo, like.
I think that comes from coming outside your neighborhood. That comes from exposure. That comes from being well-rounded because you see other lifestyles and like, wait, there's more than just getting shot in the street. Oh, word? Okay. I didn't know that. So you got to come outside your area. You got to come out of home to see that this is trauma or this is not normal. You have to. So if you stay in your hood, that's all you know.
Unless you go to like Chicago or Baltimore.
But even so, they got their good areas too. It's not all crazy over there.
I went to school in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Where?
Every place got a good and bad.
Loyola. It was very lily white. I'm sorry. I mean, it is.
I used to live in Baltimore. That's why I asked. I used to live in Baltimore. That's why I asked definitely for a reason. Because if you would have told me you was by Lexington Market, I'd have been like, whoa, what the?
I know where.
Yeah, I know you know Lexington Market.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right, so
maybe I should give a disclaimer.
No, you can't. So then,
you can't.
as we speak about these things, right? Like how we normalize these traumas, right? So how do you like? What would you say to someone to protect their mental well-being when they come across these type of things that they might or might not know it might be something that's affecting them?
Don't be afraid to speak about it, but be mindful of where you speak about it, because you don't want to say, you know what, I think I had a traumatic experience and I didn't know it was trauma and blah 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 blah, and then someone invalidates what you shared and then ends up re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
So you're like, you bear all, and it's just like, you know what, I came to the realization that, you know, I saw my parents fighting, I saw my father go upside my mother's head constantly, and, you know, it's affecting me in my relationships, and
let's get shot every day, B.
I mean, it was a direct quote. I mean,
shot every day, B.
Come on, man.
He be alright.
It's like the editing job was gonna be so easy until.
Alright, brothers get shot every day. It don't got the same ring to it. Do it. Brothers get shot every day, babe.
It will if someone hasn't seen Paid in Full.
He be alright.
Our demographic has seen Paid in Full.
Oh shoot.
Most of them.
Have you seen Paid in Full? Please comment if you have, or if you haven't.
I didn't see it.
So with that being said, how do you know who you can disclose your trauma to?
That might be another episode, because you can relate that to mental health, but that's discernment. Like, you have to be able to discern the people who are around you. Yeah. If you didn't feel safe with them when you were sharing your highs, it's not going to be safe to share your lows with them. That's right. Also, if there's someone who, if it's someone who, and they can be like a good friend or whatever, but certain things. You see these flaws, right? But certain jobs require certain tools. Mm-hmm. Certain jobs require certain professionals. And if you know that, you know, your homegirl, she's cool, she's a good listener, but she is not going to be able to handle the job with the tools that she has, she might not be the person that you need to go to. Not saying that she's not a good homegirl, but saying that she's not equipped to give you the response that you need. And not the response that you want to hear, but the response that you need to hear, the help that you need to get. I think discernment, and I don't want to get preachy, but you have to discern who's around you. If you feel safe in other situations, then it might be safe to speak about your mental health struggles and your challenges and your trauma.
That's definitely a whole nother topic in itself.
Knowing your circle.
Knowing your circle.
How many of us have to?
You can get preachy.
Can I just say one thing real quick? I don't know if it's on topic, but I have a friend who was in the Army, and she saw her fellow comrade get killed, right? And she had PTSD, right? And she felt like she didn't want to get cured. Like, I don't want to get cured from people. I want to remember this, because I feel like it's the only way for me to remember my friend. If I lose the memory of my friend, then I feel like I betrayed him, because now I don't remember
guilt.
Right. So it's like they want that memory to keep their friend alive in their thoughts, in their minds. So, and I feel that's kind of crazy. Because it's like, it's so selfless. I mean, it's selfless, but it's kind of crazy.
It depends on what purpose it's serving for her. Because if she is holding on to that memory and it's keeping her bound or stuck in that, if it's not helping her, then she needs to, and I don't like to use these words as a therapist, but she needs to not let it go, but process it. She needs to process it so that way she can still honor the memory of her comrades.
It's not helping her relationships. It's not helping her children.
You got kids.
No.
Not that she's about to sing Frozen.
They deleted it from my phone.
Yeah, let it go. Yeah. She got kids. You gotta watch it.
I never heard anything like that before, so it was very interesting to hear that.
But when you can't make sense of things, you grasp at straws to make meaning of it. That's why so many people, historically Black people, Latino people go to church, because church is what we use to make meaning, to make sense of things. So that's why a lot of us will go to PASA instead of going to a therapist.
Either you go to PASA or you go to NASA.
PASA gonna need therapy afterwards.
You go to PASA.
And you know what?
Honestly, a lot of them do.
Yes.
A lot of them do.
A lot of us need therapy. More of us should be in therapy because think about it. We have to hold everything that people come to us with. And in the state of New York, pastors are not mandated reporters.
Right.
Holy shit.
We're not.
Right.
So we have to carry this stuff. I mean, unless you're like the lead pastor and, you know, pillow talk with the first lady and, you know.
And even with that, like.
You still have to keep it in the house.
Trauma.
No, but to an extent, there's but so much you're going to tell there's so much the pastor's going to tell his or her spouse because of it depends on the weight of what the person, you know, their parishioner told them. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of confidentiality, and yeah, your spouse is your confidant or whatever, and they're supposed to help you carry the stuff that that it is that you have to carry. Unfortunately, because of the calling that you have on your life, a lot of times you don't want to put that stuff on the person who's supposed to walk that path with you.
But you put it on your therapist.
I have a question.
But it's the same thing with it's the same thing even with your therapist and psychiatrist. A lot of times they can't go home and talk to their spouse about what it is that they've spoken to you about. So they have, what happens is, like, I'm in school for psychology, but you have to learn to separate yourself from what people are telling you. Or whatever. It's easier said than done, especially if you're an empath.
Yep. But in the medical field, I do it every day. People die.
Empath talk. I'm about to leave. So I have a question for you, Dr. Tay.
He's like, moving on.
It's true though.
Yeah,
I understand.
So recently,
he just gave y'all to wrap it up.
Recently, we saw the video that was trending a couple of weeks ago of the Karen that was in Victoria's Secret that was trying to attack this black woman, and I don't understand how when watching the video she was screaming to tell this woman to get away from her as she was chasing her. Right? Are you familiar with this?
I'm not, and I'm glad. But
my goodness!
I'm about ready to pull it up for you.
Oh man, okay, damn.
But yeah, describe it to her.
So it was a black woman.
Harass me while I'm getting draws.
So it was a black woman.
Oh yeah,
she was in Victoria's Secret. She was there to get her free panties that she got with the coupon.
She said that too.
She said that in the video.
Yes,
she said it in the video,
she
right?
did.
So this white woman, you see her in the video attempt to assault her, right? So this woman.
But why? Like, what's the backstory?
There is no backstory.
There is no backstory.
She just ran up on him.
Yeah. I've seen. I don't know the backstory. There's
no backstory.
There's no backstory, right? So she attempts to assault this black woman, and the black woman, she pulls out her phone. She attempts to record. She's getting very little help from security, and this white woman goes through a range of emotions. She goes from crying to like fake passing out to screaming to chasing her around the store, right? So
stop videoing me.
You have the video for it?
You have the video.
Wait.
Oh, I got the video.
All right.
Wait,
so
what?
We're gonna
Wait,
take a moment.
shaking.
Yeah, she's shaking.
Oh, she was wilding.
We're gonna let.
So
it's evident that the woman in the video, you know, I'm not a professional, but she looks like she's suffering from some mental health issues, and I feel like that we're on the cusp of one of these Karens, one of these MAGA hat wearing people. They're gonna be recorded. They're gonna lose their jobs. They're gonna lose their livelihood. People that know them are gonna stop speaking to them because they don't want to have the optics of being associated with a person who behaves in this manner. And then one of these people is gonna make an attempt on their life.
What do you mean by that?
Attempt suicide.
Okay.
Right.
Make it clear.
And whether they're successful or not, I feel like the narrative is going to shift to where the black person that was in the scenario that was clearly the person that wasn't the aggressor, the narrative is going to shift and they're going to say that this black person was wrong for recording and posting and shaming them, and that's what led to this person making the attempt on this life. So I feel like for you as a professional, what would you suggest that if any one of us that was sitting here on this panel, if we were smack dab in the middle of a situation like that in real time, what would you suggest we do to protect ourselves?
Report it. because in recent years, I mean, as far as the scapegoating, because that's what it is, that's what you described, it's nothing we're not used to. And you can't control what they're going to use to scapegoat you for. But at the end of the day, you can't make someone want to end their life. Just like I can't make you feel sad. I can say something and that's your response, but I cannot make you do something. So that's one. Recording. Because in recent years, we found that recording is the difference between being sentenced and being, what's the word? Not indicted. What's acquitted? Whatever.
Acquitted, yeah.
So I'd say record it. The video that we just saw, the black woman in the situation, she didn't throw hands or whatever, but now it's viral. Now the woman probably doesn't have her job, or they're questioning it. Well, you know what? Let's not assume, because you said, people will start to fall away and not want to be associated with them because the optics. They say misery loves company.
I mean,
there's always going to be a friend who continues to wear the MAGA hat.
I mean, the black woman, she's attempting to sue them all because she wasn't happy with the response from security, and she's already raised like about $80,000 in her GoFundMe.
For her lawyer.
For her lawyer's fees. So
I think a lawsuit makes perfect sense. Because if security is there to secure and not just make sure that people are wearing their masks, then they should have intervened.
Yeah, because unfortunately, had it been one of us, had the situation been different. Like, matter of fact, it was just one of us saying like,
SWAT would have been out.
Yeah, we didn't like the service that we got because the woman behind the desk was wrong.
I am a 250-pound black man with a beard.
You're 250?
Yeah.
Damn, son.
Wait. I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Listen,
damn.
Y'all watching the show.
Elaborate.
Y'all seen Uptown Bravo. Go ahead, continue with your point.
Big black man with a beard. I would have been... Man, listen, I could imagine the things they would have said about me.
All right, so with that being said, you were right, Dr. Tay. One part was not enough to get all of the questions that we had, ready for you. And your advice so far has been amazing.
Spot on.
Thank you.
But we have to, unfortunately, as you guys know, we have to start to wrap it up because it's just how it is. So we have, what do we call it?
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. So we're gonna go. We should lead Dr. Tay with what you've heard so far. What are your final thoughts?
I gotta be first though.
Okay, I'll be first. That's fine. I'll be first.
Give me a chance.
So, based on everything that we've talked about today, there were some things that I wasn't even aware of, as far as seeking help, not knowing when to seek your help, because the things that we do normally, that we tend to normalize is not always normal, and you should, like you said, discern who it is that you speak these truths to in order to figure out how to navigate these emotions and feelings that you have, because they affect you and they affect your livelihood and the people that you are involved in some form and fashion, and might possibly be some type of generational inheritance that you've inherited from your parents if there's something that you're doing. So you gave me a lot to think on, and I thank you for that, because you wowed me on a couple of things, and I was like, oh man. So I will definitely be looking for my therapist to speak some truth, to figure out what it is, where else I need to heal from.
I want to say thank you for representing me.
I
love that you are here representing us. I want to see more of this. You make me proud. And I also like to see the fact that there's a lot of social media advertising about therapy. Like, I'm glad it's out there. People are talking about it more. And that's right now, that's the news. That's the newspaper. Social media is the newspaper.
Yeah.
So if you want something to change, you put that on social media. Trust me, a couple of months, it's going to be something. So I appreciate social media is making it acceptable for Black people to seek therapy, changing households, changing families, changing marriages, changing the way you raise your children because you're healing. And I appreciate all of that. And I feel like us Black people have been through so much that I'll take it. I'm taking it. I'm loving it, you know, and I commend you. Keep doing what you do. And I will go with you, girl. You good. You good.
Thank you.
And that's all I have to say.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Well,
Not annoying, yo.
Dr. T. What you mean? No, Pastor T.
Oh, here you go.
Thanks for showing up for us. Again, you have definitely given us some things to think about. We appreciate it. You know, generational versus you know, like all these different traumas that we have. Finding safe spaces where we can, you know, knowing who to speak to about what we're dealing with, and not you know, talking to just anybody. Understanding that everybody's not equipped to handle all of us, and just being able to find out who can and who can't. You know, so discernment is a big thing, you know, and just learning how to figure out who
What's
it is that we
discernment?
can.
People might not know what that means. What does discernment mean?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, preacher.
You're saying
You done called me out too many times. Go ahead.
What's discernment? Let them know what discernment is.
So discernment is being able to, I guess for a layman's term, being able to read people, being able to understand.
Right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, here we go. Being able to read people and being able to understand, you know, I guess we might speak about their vibes.
Right.
And the type of vibes, you know, how they carry themselves,
Vibes
who they are.
discernment.
Yeah, vibes of discernment. You know, whether it's light, darkness, what they can
Energy.
handle, what they can't handle. Yeah. See?
Like I said, a lot of different terms.
I'm sorry.
To describe.
Uptown Brown not on that level, so y'all gotta explain on a different. You gotta speak different terms.
But that's why I said lightness, light, darkness, energy.
Nope.
To me, discernment is your inner voice that talks to you.
Yeah.
That voice that talks to you.
You want to give your final thought, Dr. T?
Yo!
Let me last. You
That's not nice.
I'm gonna be last. My final thought is Mama say, Mama sa, Mama kusa. I don't know what it means, but it sounds good. That's it.
Oh, here we go.
That's it?
Is this
That's it?
beautiful?
That's it.
That was it.
Oh, you had no idea.
All right, so.
Okay. Dr. T.
Take us home, Dr. T.
It's okay to be okay, but it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. No,
Come
but
on, give us the
seriously.
benediction.
Anyway, no, I think it's important that we have these discussions because it normalizes us not being okay. It normalizes the common experiences that we've had as Black people, as people of color, things that we haven't talked about, things that have happened in our families that we haven't talked about. It's okay to talk about it. Because sometimes talking about it is going to help you heal. Sometimes that's just the first step. You have to talk about you gotta talk about it in safe spaces, and that might be with a professional, that might be with your pastor if your pastor is also trained in counseling, and that's probably another episode. But it's okay to accept the fact that you're not okay. It's okay to accept the fact that you haven't been okay for a long time. Once you recognize it, as long as you don't stay there and you do what you have to do in order to emerge from that place, then you're on the right track.
Amen, sister.
Oh man, you said something, and I would have asked you another question, but we at the end. We at the end. So
She just gonna have to come back.
she gonna have to come back. Dr. Tay, will you come back?
I will.
Dr. Tay is coming back, y'all. Thank you so much. Listen, we hope you enjoyed the show. Mental illness episode, man, it spoke to my heart. I know for sure. Hopefully, it spoke to yours. And as always, we taking you home.
Ramona.
Hollywood Dre.
Uptown.
Luke, Harlem Skywalker, and
Dr. Tay.
we hope you guys have a great day and a better tomorrow. Peace.